impression that you are extremely disponible, extremely open, and ready to go places you wouldn't even have imagined. You don't give the impression of someone who would think about the role and have a plan and have a very, very elaborate construction before going in front of the camera. Is that a true impression?
It's a very bad fault. It's a very bad fault, and you've hit it right on the head. Because where my daughters write down things and plan, Lou was planning, because they're doing the film out of sequence, and so she has to plan what she has to do. And I saw her script absolutely chock-a-block full of notes and Charlotte's too. She doesn't want you to look at them, but they're notes that she's taken. And I realized how very frivolous I had been. I remembered when I was doing a film only a couple of years ago with Geraldine Chaplin about the life of Robert Louis Stevenson. And we had to do it in Cuba, but in fact we were supposed to be in the Samoa Islands. And as it was a telefilm and we had to do everything so fast, I was trying to learn the lines at night because then no one had given me the right script, so speaking French is quite difficult to get it right. So I was trying to learn it, and my co-actor was quite difficult. So I was just learning the lines at night, and in the morning I didn't really think what I was supposed to be doing in particular. And I went barging into the hut that was supposed to be the Stevensons' house. And then I saw Geraldine Chaplin and everybody looking rather strange. So I said to Geraldine, "What's happened?" And she said, "Your son has just been shot. We're surrounded by savages. We're about to die." I said, "Oh my gosh." So I said, "Thank you," and rushed outside again and came back. Of course you can cry in about 2.5 seconds, especially when you've made a big betise like that. So I made myself cry thinking of awful things as usual, and then came in tears and then hugged my poor son with his wounded arm, and he said, "That's the arm that has been shot." And I thought, "Oh yes, of course, with the other arm." And I realized that I wasn't really cut out to be an actress at all, that I should have thought it all out before, that I should have planned it the way my children do. It would have been safer. But it was funnier. And thank goodness I had Geraldine, so no one even saw. The director was thinking of something quite different, and that no one else had seen my mistake. It was Geraldine, who's a really fine actress, and she really does plan what she's doing. She holds onto her little purse when she plays with little old ladies. And even when the Samoan tries to get it away from her, she goes like this. She thinks of her role. And that's why I was lucky to have her when I made my first or second movie, actually, but the first movie that was really done like a movie and that it hadn't got arte behind it. Then I had such incredible actors like John Hurt, and I had Jackie Cario, and I had Piccoli, and I had the wonderful Geraldine Chaplin, I had my own daughter Lou, I had Benny Chou, and actually they'd all thought of their parts so much. As we were doing the film in 5.5 weeks, I didn't really have to direct them very much. Lou was already in tears on the first scene because she knew what she was talking about. I knew the story because I'd written it and because I could practically do it in my sleep, in that I'd been trying to get the film off the ground for nearly 5 years. So I realized how lucky I was to be with very, very gifted actors that needed nearly nothing. Just to say sometimes, do a little less. But I mean, practically nothing. They just needed encouragement. And I knew where to put the camera and try to catch them, because if you're going to be a director, Jacques Doyon told me, just be sure you've got film in the camera. Because it had happened to him on a film called La Drôlesse, where he started a shot with Maddie, who was a girl that actually wasn't a professional actress. And she started to cry. And Jacques was filming, and then he heard and he realized there was no more film in the camera. So he held Maddie's hand and he said, "Quick, quick, another bobine." And they said, "We've got to fill them all up. There were no new ones." So he had to hold her hand for something like 10 minutes. And she started to cry. Everything that was in her eyes had started to roll down her cheeks. By the time they came back with a new Bobina film. It was fine, she cried, and she was wonderful. But he didn't get the point when her eyes had nothing in them, where they were swelling with tears, and then it happened. He said, never ever let that happen to you. And I also knew from Dirk Bogarde, who was very sweet, he held onto my hand under the table when I was willing to cry immediately in a scene we had in a cafe in Daddy Nostalgie, Tavernier's film. And he held my hand and he squeezed it and he said, not now, not now. And I thought, why? And it was because there was a bus. And he had realized that if I'd said the dialogue there with the bus, I would have to have dubbed it, or they would have to have started again. And afterwards I thanked him and he said, you know, I've seen it before, because with Tom Courtenay in King and Country, probably one of my favorite films of the 1914-18 war, it was Joseph Losey. And Tom Courtenay he had to do his trial sequence. And he started the rehearsals just before lunchtime in the English studios outside London. And because there were a few technicians that were around, he got carried away and he started to do such a wonderful performance. But Bogarde tried to tell him that the cameras had gone off because everyone had gone off for lunch. So to stop, to wait, and to keep it all for after lunch. But Tom couldn't stop, and he started to cry, and he was absolutely wonderful. And Bogarde said to me, after lunch, he was fine, the scene's wonderful, but he'd seen something that you would never get again. And so, never rehearse too much. Do à l'italienne, so that the technicians know where you're going to roughly be, so that it's not too complicated for them, because even if you're wonderful as an actor, if the perchman gets his perch in the way, or if the person doing the focus doesn't get you right, your scene won't be in the movie. So we owe our careers to perchmans and people who got it right, and that we have to remember and be modest about. And therefore, not to miss the performances of others. I was so careful in boxes, especially with people that I knew were very, very fragile and would give everything immediately. And so if you're a director, be sure there's film in the camera and don't make them rehearse too much, and be ready to catch it. If you have that privilege of having an actress who gives everything, and be ready for an accident too, because they could be more interesting sometimes than what you'd planned. On that you have to have a very nifty ballet dancer to suddenly realize you're going to go a different way, because that too can. So, directors and movie actresses that are in front of me, is there anything else you'd like to know from this much used, but maybe can count on 10 fingers, the good films, out of about 120 really bad ones?